You've probably been told that if a man isn't interested, there's nothing you can do, that you either have it or you don't. But what if that's not true? What if attraction isn't just about who you are, but how you make someone feel when you're not there? Because the real power isn't in chasing attention, it's in creating absence that lingers, energy that echoes, and a presence he can't quite replace. And today, you're going to learn exactly how to make any man miss you. Yes, even the one who barely notices you right now. Let's start with something that feels completely counterintuitive, especially if you genuinely like someone. Your instinct tells you to give more attention, more time, more effort. You reply quickly, you show up consistently, you make things easy for him, and it comes from a good place. You're not trying to impress, you're trying to connect. But here's where most people get it wrong. When something feels constantly available, the human mind slowly starts to assign it less value. Think about it. We don't chase what's always there. We don't sit around wondering about something that's predictable. And attraction, at its core, thrives on a little bit of uncertainty, a little bit of space, a little bit of, I'm not fully sure where I stand yet. When you remove that completely, when you become the one who is always giving, always initiating, always accommodating, you unintentionally remove the very tension that creates desire. Now, this doesn't mean you start playing games or pretending you don't care. That's not the energy we're going for. This is about balance. It's about recognizing that your time, your attention, your presence, these are valuable. And anything valuable is not given endlessly without thought. When you begin to pull back just slightly, not disappear, not act cold, just stop overextending. You allow something powerful to happen. You create space. And in that space, his mind finally has room to process you. Because when you're constantly there, he doesn't have to think about you. You're already in front of him. But when you step back even a little, something shifts. He starts to notice your absence. He starts to feel the difference between when you were there and when you're not. And that contrast is what creates missing. Overgiving often comes from a place of wanting reassurance. You think, if I show him how much I care, he'll naturally give that back. But attraction doesn't always work like that. Sometimes the more you give without it being earned, the more it gets taken for granted. Not because he's a bad person, but because that's just how human psychology works. We appreciate things more when there's a sense of effort, when there's a feeling that it could be lost. So instead of always being the first to text, let there be moments where you don't. Instead of always saying yes immediately, take your time. Let your life continue without constantly revolving around his presence. You're not withdrawing love. You're creating room for it to grow on both sides. And here's the deeper truth. When you stop overgiving, you also start respecting yourself at a higher level. You begin to operate from a place where your energy is not something you hand out freely to anyone who shows a little interest. It becomes something that is experienced, appreciated, and gradually earned. That shift alone changes how people respond to you, because now, instead of feeling like you're trying to win him over, it feels like you're someone he has to meet halfway. And that's where real attraction begins, not when one person is doing all the work, but when both people feel the pull. So if you want to be missed, if you want him to think about you when you're not around, it starts here, not by giving more, but by finally giving less in a way that makes your presence mean something. Because people don't miss what they always have. They miss what they suddenly feel they might lose. Now, once you understand the power of not overgiving, the next shift is even deeper, because it's not just about how often he sees you, it's about how he feels when he does. And this is where most people focus on the surface. They think attraction is built on looks, on saying the right things, on trying to impress. And yes, those things might get attention in the beginning, but attention is not the same as impact. What actually makes someone miss you is not your appearance. It's the emotional imprint you leave behind. Think about the people you've never been able to forget. It wasn't just how they looked, it was how you felt around them. Maybe they made you feel understood in a way no one else did. Maybe they brought out a lighter, more playful side of you. Maybe there was a sense of calm or excitement or even a little mystery. That emotional experience stayed with you long after they were gone. That's the level you want to operate on, because a man can admire many people, but he only truly misses the one who made him feel something different. So instead of asking, how do I look, or what should I say, start asking, what does it feel like to be around me? Do you bring warmth into the space? Do you listen in a way that makes him feel heard, not just responded to? Do you allow moments of silence to feel comfortable instead of rushed? These small things create emotional depth, and depth is what builds attachment. And here's something important. Being emotionally memorable doesn't mean being overly intense or dramatic. It's actually the opposite. It's about being present. When you're with him, you're not trying to prove yourself. You're not seeking validation. You're not overthinking every word. You're simply there, grounded, real, and engaged. That authenticity creates a kind of ease that people don't experience often. And because it's rare, it becomes unforgettable. It's also about contrast. If every interaction feels the same, it fades quickly. But when there's a mix, lightness and depth, playfulness and sincerity, it keeps the experience alive in his mind. One moment you're laughing, the next you're sharing something meaningful. That emotional variation creates a rhythm that the brain holds on to. And here's where it connects back to being missed. When someone associates you with a feeling they don't get anywhere else, your absence doesn't feel neutral. It feels like something is missing from their emotional world. They might not even be able to explain it logically, but they'll feel it. You don't have to compete with anyone else when you operate like this because you're not trying to be better. You're being different. And different is what stands out. Different is what lingers. So let go of the idea that you need to impress him into missing you. You don't need perfection. You don't need performance. What you need is presence, emotional awareness, and the willingness to let him experience you, not just see you. Because at the end of the day, people don't miss faces, they miss feelings. Now, this next shift is subtle, but it's incredibly powerful when you start using it the right way. It's the art of not overstaying your presence, of knowing when to step away while things still feel good. Because most people do the opposite. They wait until the conversation slows down, until the energy dips, until there's nothing left to say, and then they leave. But by that point, the emotional peak has already passed. There's nothing left for the mind to hold on to. What you want to do instead is leave before that drop happens. Right when the conversation is flowing, when you're both engaged, when there's laughter or connection, that's your moment. That's when you pull back. That's when you say, I've got to go, but I'll talk to you later. Or you wrap up the interaction while there's still energy in the air. And it might feel strange at first because part of you wants to stay in that moment, but that's exactly why it works. Because you're creating something unfinished. And the human mind doesn't like unfinished experiences. It keeps going back, replaying moments, trying to extend the feeling that was cut short. So instead of him walking away feeling like, okay, that was nice, it's done, he walks away thinking, wait, I wanted more of that. That small shift turns a normal interaction into something that lingers. Think about it like your favorite scene in a movie that ends just a little too soon. It stays with you longer than the scenes that dragged on. Why? Because it left you wanting more. And when you consistently create that feeling in your interactions, you become someone associated with anticipation, not completion. This applies to texting too. You don't always have to respond with long, drawn-out conversations that go on for hours until they lose momentum. Sometimes it's better to end on a high note. A short, engaging exchange that leaves a little space afterward can be far more powerful than constant back and forth that slowly fades into boredom. And again, this isn't about manipulation. It's about understanding emotional timing. It's about recognizing that connection grows stronger when there's rhythm, when there's presence, and then space, engagement, and then absence. That contrast is what keeps someone mentally and emotionally invested. Another important part of this is confidence. When you're willing to leave first, you're signaling something without saying it directly. You're showing that your world doesn't pause just because the interaction feels good. You have other things to do, other parts of your life to return to. And that kind of energy is deeply attractive because it communicates self-respect and independence. It also shifts the dynamic. Instead of you being the one holding on, waiting for the conversation to continue, he becomes the one who feels the gap you left behind. He becomes the one who wonders when he'll get that feeling again. And that's where missing begins. Not in constant presence, but in the space that follows it. So the next time you find yourself in a great moment, resist the urge to stretch it until it fades. End it while it still has life. Let that energy stay intact in his mind instead of letting it slowly disappear in real time. Because the goal isn't to give him everything in one moment. It's to give him just enough that he keeps wanting the next one. Leave him at the peak, not the end. Now, this next part is where everything starts to come together, because it's not just about how you interact with him. It's about the life you're living outside of him. And this is where real attraction either strengthens or quietly fades away. When your world starts to revolve around one person, Even subtly, you lose something important. You lose that sense of independence, that sense of movement, that feeling that your life is full with or without them. And the moment that happens, the dynamic shifts. Instead of him feeling like he's stepping into an already vibrant world, it starts to feel like he is the world. And strangely enough, that creates pressure instead of attraction. Because what draws people in isn't just connection, it's curiosity. When you have a life that feels full, layered, and meaningful, there are parts of you he doesn't automatically have access to. Not because you're hiding anything, but because your world is naturally rich with experiences, goals, friendships, and moments that exist beyond him. And that's what makes someone lean in. That's what makes them want to know more. Think about the difference. If you're always available, always waiting, always adjusting your schedule around his, there's nothing left to discover. But when you're engaged in your own life, when you have things you're excited about, places you go, people you connect with, there's a natural sense of mystery that forms. He doesn't see everything all at once. And that's what keeps his attention active. It also changes how you show up in every interaction. When your happiness isn't dependent on how he responds, your energy becomes lighter. You're not overanalyzing messages. You're not waiting for validation. You're not trying to hold on to the moment. You're simply sharing a part of your already fulfilling life. And that kind of energy feels effortless, and effortlessness is magnetic. Now, this doesn't mean you need to suddenly become someone completely different or fill your schedule just to appear busy. It's not about pretending. It's about reconnecting with your own direction. What excites you? What are you building for yourself? What makes you feel alive when no one else is watching? When you start investing in those areas, your life naturally expands. And here's the powerful part. When he sees that you're moving forward, growing, experiencing things without depending on him, it creates a subtle but strong shift in how he perceives you. You're no longer just someone who's available to him. You're someone he has to step into, someone he has to keep up with, not someone who is waiting around. That's where respect builds. And respect is a key ingredient in being missed. Because when there's respect, there's also a sense that you're not easily replaceable. Not because you're trying to prove it, but because your life reflects it. You're not competing for attention. You're creating a standard through how you live. And it also protects you. When your life is full, you don't get lost in someone else's inconsistency. You don't shrink yourself to fit into their availability. You maintain your center regardless of what they do. And ironically, that's what often draws them closer. So instead of asking how to make him more interested, shift the focus back to building something he would naturally be drawn to. A life that feels real, engaging, and independent. Because when your world is something he can't fully access, he doesn't lose interest. He becomes curious about how to be a part of it. And that curiosity is what turns into missing. Now, this is where a lot of people get it wrong, because once they hear create space, they take it to the extreme. They disappear, they stop replying, they act distant or cold, thinking that's what will suddenly make him chase. But there's a big difference between creating space and creating confusion. And confusion doesn't build attraction. It breaks connection. What actually works is something much more balanced, much more controlled. It's not about cutting him off. It's about becoming less predictable in your availability. Because when something is completely predictable, it loses its emotional impact. If he knows exactly when you'll reply, exactly how long you'll talk, exactly that you'll always be there no matter what, there's no anticipation. And without anticipation, there's nothing to miss. But the moment that pattern shifts, even slightly, his awareness increases. He starts to notice the pauses. He starts to feel the difference between constant access and limited access. And that's where your presence starts to gain weight, not because you're doing more, but because you're not always there. Now, this doesn't mean you ignore him or play games with response times. It means you respond when it feels natural for you, not when you feel pressure to maintain momentum. Some days you might be more engaged, other days less, and that's okay. That's real life. And that natural rhythm is far more attractive than forced consistency, because when your communication is rooted in your own pace, it sends a message without words. Your life is full, your attention is intentional, and your time is not something that's automatically given. And here's something important. Warmth should never disappear. Even when you're creating space, your tone remains the same. You're still kind, still present when you do engage, still genuine in your energy. That's what separates distance from disinterest. You're not pulling away emotionally, you're simply allowing room for both of you to breathe. This balance is what keeps the connection alive while still creating the conditions for him to miss you. Because if you go completely silent, he might just assume you've lost interest and move on. But if you're always there, he never gets the chance to feel your absence. The power is in that middle ground where you're present enough to build connection, but distant enough to create desire. And over time, something subtle begins to happen. He starts to adjust to your rhythm instead of you constantly adjusting to his. He starts to put in more effort to maintain the connection because now it's not guaranteed. Now it requires intention on his part too. That shift is everything because attraction grows when both people are investing, not when one person is carrying the entire dynamic. And by creating this kind of space, you're inviting him to step forward without forcing him. It also protects your energy. You're no longer overextending, overthinking, or overanalyzing every interaction. You're allowing things to unfold naturally without trying to control every outcome. And that sense of ease changes how you come across. It makes you feel grounded, confident, and self-assured. And those qualities don't just attract attention, they hold it. So instead of disappearing or overcompensating, focus on finding that balance. Stay warm, stay real, but stop being constantly available. Let there be moments where your absence can be felt, not because you're trying to prove something, but because your life naturally requires your attention elsewhere. Because when your presence is no longer constant, it becomes something he starts to look forward to. And what people look forward to, they eventually begin to miss. And now we come to the final shift, the one that quietly ties everything together. Because once you've created space, built emotional depth, and stopped overextending, something interesting begins to happen. He starts to see that your life is moving, evolving, expanding with or without him. And that's where a powerful emotional trigger comes into play. It's the feeling of possibly missing out, not in a loud, obvious way, not in a way where you're trying to make him jealous or prove something, but in a subtle, undeniable way where he starts to sense that there's more to you than what he's currently experiencing, and that he might not have full access to it. This is important because people don't fully value something when they believe it will always be there. But the moment there's even a small possibility that they could lose it, their attention sharpens, their curiosity deepens, and their emotional investment begins to grow. Now, this doesn't mean you go out of your way to create artificial scenarios or post things just to get a reaction. That kind of energy feels forced and people can sense it. What actually works is much more natural. It's simply living your life in a way that reflects growth, enjoyment, and forward movement. You're doing things you enjoy. You're spending time with people who bring out the best in you. You're experiencing moments that feel real and fulfilling. And occasionally, he gets a glimpse of that, not the full picture, not every detail, just enough to recognize that your world is active and evolving. And that's where the shift happens. Because now, instead of feeling like you're waiting for him to choose you, it feels like he might have to step up if he wants to be part of your life. There's a difference between being available and being valuable. And value is often recognized when there's a sense that it's not guaranteed. He starts to wonder what you're doing when you're not talking to him. He starts to think about the experiences he's not part of. He begins to feel that slight tension, the idea that if he doesn't move, if he doesn't engage, he might slowly fade out of your world. And that feeling, when it's triggered in a healthy way, creates action. But here's the key. You're not doing this for him. You're not shaping your life just to create a reaction. You're doing it because it's genuinely aligned with who you are becoming. The fact that it makes him more aware of you is simply a byproduct. Because the truth is, the most attractive position you can be in is one where your happiness is not dependent on someone else's attention. When you reach that point, everything changes. Your energy becomes lighter, your interactions become more natural, and your presence becomes something people feel rather than something you try to force. And ironically, that's when people start to lean in the most, because now there's something at stake. Now there's something that could be lost. And loss, even the possibility of it, has a way of waking people up emotionally. So instead of trying to hold his attention tightly, you allow space for him to realize what your absence feels like. You let him see in small ways that your life is continuing, growing, and unfolding, whether he's part of it or not. And that realization is what turns indifference into interest and interest into something deeper. Because in the end, people don't chase what's given to them. They chase what they feel they might lose.